Strike a match in the world I am about to show you, and the whole forest could catch. Around 320 million years ago, the air on this planet was so loaded with oxygen that fire behaved almost like a living thing, racing through soaking wet swamps, climbing trees while they were still alive, burning its signature into the coal we dig up today. This was the Carboniferous, the most flammable chapter the Earth has ever lived through. And in that overcharged air, the small things turned monstrous. Dragonflies as wide as a hawk, scorpions the length of your arm, a millipede longer than a car. You would not have lasted an afternoon in this place. You would also never see anything like it again. Let me set you down inside it. We are deep in what geologists call the Carboniferous, an age that opened roughly 359 million years in the past and closed near 299. It comes long before the dinosaurs, before the first true reptile had fully found its feet. There are no flowers anywhere on the planet, no birdsong, no blade of grass. What surrounds you instead is a swamp forest that runs from one horizon to the next, impossibly green, warm, dripping wet. These are not the trees you know. Their giants are towering relatives of the tiny modern club moss, scaled trunks named lepidodendron and sigillaria, rising 30 or 40 meters with almost no branches until the very top, where they burst into crowns of green. Between them stand calamities, horsetails grown into trees, ringed like bamboo, and just as tall. Beneath your feet lies a soft black mush of fallen plants that never quite seems to rot. Pools of standing water sit the color of strong tea. And the air, that ordinary thing you have never once had to think about, is the strangest part of all. Stand still for a moment and just listen, because the sound of this place alone would unsettle you. There is no bird call, none at all, because birds will not exist for ages yet. What reaches your ears instead is insect, the dry rattle and drone of countless wings, some of them enormous, beating through air so humid it feels like warm water against your skin. Its smell is decay and fresh green growth at the same instant, the breath of a forest that grows quicker than it can rot. Heat presses down through a hazy sun. Nothing here is hostile the way a predator is hostile. It is far stranger than that. This world simply runs on different chemistry, and your body does not belong to it. So let me explain what that air was doing, because it is the engine of this entire story. Today, you breathe an atmosphere that is about 21% oxygen. During the Carboniferous, that figure climbed far higher, peaking near 35%, the richest oxygen the planet has ever held. Behind it lie those forests, and one very specific accident of timing. Plants had recently cracked the trick of building tall, woody trunks out of a tough material called lignin. Here is the part that changes everything. Almost nothing had yet evolved that could break lignin back down. Fungi and microbes that rot wood today had not caught up to this strange new substance. So when one of the scaled giants toppled into the swamp, it did not decay the way a fallen log decays in your garden. It simply lay there, then got buried, locking away inside itself every scrap of carbon it had pulled from the sky. Run that across tens of millions of years and entire continents, and the result turns planetary. Carbon dioxide went down and kept dropping, while the oxygen those forests exhaled built up with nowhere to go. Our whole world was quietly charging itself like a battery, one buried forest at a time. Whether the missing wood-rotting fungi were really the main driver is a question scientists still debate, yet the outcome written in the rock is beyond doubt. Something allowed an astonishing amount of carbon to get locked underground instead of cycling back into the open air. That buried carbon is no abstraction. It is the coal. The very word carboniferous means coal-bearing, and the seams that later powered our factories, our railways, our entire industrial revolution were laid down here, in these dripping forests, pressed flat under the weight of the deep past. Honestly, I find that hard to hold in my head. The black rock feeding a power plant was once a living tree, breathing in a world no human eye would ever see. And this only happened once. The particular gap that made it possible, tall trees on one side and no efficient way to rot them on the other, was a quirk of evolutionary timing that never came again. Most of the richest coal on the planet, the seams that built the modern age, trace right back to this single window in deep time. Later, forests grew and died and rotted the way forests are supposed to, their carbon going back to the sky within years rather than vanishing underground for an eternity. So the coal in the ground is not simply old fuel. It is the fossil of a loophole, a brief stretch when the world forgot how to recycle its own trees. Now, the giants, because this is where the strangeness becomes flesh. In that supercharged air, a whole class of creatures grew to sizes that are flatly impossible today, and the most celebrated of them ruled the space above the swamp. Meganeura looked like a dragonfly, except the largest carried a wingspan near 71 centimeters, about the reach of a sparrowhawk. An insect with the span of a bird of prey, hunting on stiff, glittering wings through the heavy air. Sharing that world were giant mayflies, while down among the roots crawled Pulmonoscorpius, a scorpion that grew to roughly 70 centimeters, as long as a human arm. And then comes the animal that still refuses to look real, even as a fossil. Arthropleura, a distant cousin of the millipede, was the single largest land invertebrate ever to exist. Estimates put the biggest at over 2.5 meters long. This is no snake. That is the size of a small car, an armored, segmented grazer working through the leaf litter that you could not have stepped over if you tried. For all its bulk, it was almost certainly a gentle thing, a plant eater grinding through ferns and rotting wood rather than chasing anything down. The real hunter was Meganeura overhead, plucking smaller insects out of the air the way a modern dragonfly does, only blown up to the proportions of a hawk. At the water's edge, early amphibians sprawled in the mud. And off in the drier corners, the first reptiles, no larger than a lizard, were quietly testing an entirely new way to live. Hold on to those little reptiles. They matter more than anything else here, and almost no one ever notices them. We know all of this from rock, not from imagination. Arthropleura left fossilized trackways pressed into ancient sandstone, parallel rows of prints up to 0.5 meter wide, the unmistakable trace of something enormous hauling itself across a Carboniferous floodplain. Meganeura survives as delicate wing impressions in fine stone, every vein still sharp after an almost unimaginable span of time. These are not artists' guesses dressed up as science. They are the real animals, caught in the act of being alive, then held in the ground long enough for a species that did not yet exist to come along and pull them back into the light. Why did the small things swell so large? For a long time, one answer seemed obvious, and it points straight back to the air. Insects and their kin do not breathe through lungs. They draw oxygen in through a branching mesh of fine tubes that run directly into their tissues, a setup that works beautifully at small sizes, yet struggles to supply a large body. Raise the oxygen toward 35%, and suddenly those tubes can feed something far bigger. More air, bigger bugs. It is a clean, satisfying story, and you will find it told as settled fact nearly everywhere. Let me be straight with you, because the real picture is more interesting than the tidy one. Researchers no longer agree that oxygen alone made these creatures giant. Newer work suggests the link is weaker and messier than the slogan implies, and a striking rival idea explains why the giants later vanished. As faster, nimbler flying hunters began to evolve, the slow, enormous insects may have been driven out of the sky, shrinking across a vast span of time, not because the oxygen fell away, but because being huge had become a liability. The rich atmosphere may have opened the door. It almost certainly was not the only reason these monsters walked through it. Here is what people miss when they imagine this world as a peaceful green Eden. Peace is the last word for it, because this world burned. Fire needs 3 ingredients, and the one that sets the real limit is oxygen, which is exactly why a candle dies under a glass. Push the atmosphere to 35% and you rewrite the rules of fire from the ground up. At those levels, even damp vegetation can ignite, and a blaze, once lit, grows far harder to stop. A single lightning strike over those endless forests did not spark the occasional small fire. It could unleash infernos that swept across whole regions, tearing through wet ground that in our gentle modern world would never catch at all. None of this is guesswork. The proof is sitting right inside the coal. Scattered through Carboniferous rock everywhere is a substance called fusane, and fusane is fossil charcoal, the blackened remains of plants burned by ancient wildfire, then buried before they could rot. So much of it survives in so many separate deposits around the globe that geologists describe this entire stretch of time as a flammable planet, a world where fire was no rare disaster but a constant editor, redrawing the forests over and over. Set the whole scene together in your mind. Trees taller than a 10-story building. Air thick enough to grow a millipede the length of a car. Fire, always somewhere on the horizon, more alive and more dangerous than anything you have ever stood near. There is even a strange logic hidden in that fire. Some scientists think it worked as a natural thermostat on the oxygen itself. Let the level creep too high, and fires would rage so freely that they burned off vegetation quicker than it could regrow, dragging the oxygen back down. In that reading, the Carboniferous balanced on a knife edge of its own making, its forests forever pushing the oxygen up, while its wildfires forever burned it back, holding the whole atmosphere near the very ceiling that living air can sustain. A world like that feels as though it should run forever. It did not. Around the 305 million year mark, something broke in an event scientists call the Carboniferous Rainforest Collapse. The climate had stayed warm and humid for ages. Now it tipped toward cooler, drier conditions, while far to the south, across the supercontinent of Gondwana, enormous ice sheets crept outward. Those great lycopsid trees, the scaled giants that had built the coal forests and pumped out the oxygen, could not survive a drying world. They had flourished standing in shallow water, and the water was retreating beneath them. What came next was a shattering. Diversity among those towering trees crashed from well over 100 kinds down to fewer than 20, limping into the next chapter of Earth's history. That single continuous rainforest, which had wrapped the wet equator like a green belt, broke into scattered islands divided by hardening ground. Oxygen's slow climb stalled, then went into reverse, and the monstrous insects and arthropods, so exquisitely tuned to one strange instant in time, began their long retreat toward the ordinary sizes we live alongside today. If you have ever wondered why no dragonfly the size of a hawk hangs outside your window, here is your answer. The window of the world that built them slammed shut, and it has stayed shut ever since. Yet every ending in deep time doubles as a beginning, and this is the moment those small, overlooked reptiles step forward. The collapse that gutted the swamp giants quietly rewarded the animals built for a harsher, drier life. Reptiles laid tough, shelled eggs that needed no pond to develop in, and their dry skin held precious moisture inside. As the wet forest fractured into islands, these creatures spread into the gaps and split into new lineages, the branches that would eventually give rise to the dinosaurs and, much further down a different limb, to you. The fall of the giant forest did not empty the earth. It quietly handed the future to another kind of life entirely. It is worth sitting with how narrowly this swung. Had those forests not risen at the exact moment the rotting fungi were missing, the great oxygen spike might never have come, and the giants with it. Had the climate not turned when it did, the swamp world might have lingered, and the dry land reptiles might have stayed minor players forever in the shadows. The one chapter that produced both the largest bugs in all of history and the ancestors of every dinosaur and every mammal hung on a small handful of accidents in the deep past. There is one last thing I cannot stop turning over. The Carboniferous never really left. In a very real sense, we dug it back up. The coal threaded through that ancient rock is the buried body of these forests, the carbon they drew out of the sky and sealed underground over countless ages. For almost the whole of human history, it lay there in the dark, unsuspected. Then, inside a few short centuries, we found it, and we began burning it far faster than that lost world had ever managed to store it, handing all of that buried carbon straight back to the atmosphere it first came from. So every time a furnace roars or a coal seam glows, something quietly strange is happening. You are borrowing from that lost green world, breathing back the carbon it once locked away, releasing a fire it set down hundreds of millions of years ago and walked away from. The giants are gone. The towering forests are gone. But their final breath is still burning inside our machines, ridiculously late, and we have decided to call it